Hey guys, welcome to this video. I'm so glad you're here. Today, I want to tell you a story about how I almost made an investment mistake that would have cost me anywhere between $180,000 to about $250,000 in new debt. Now, when telling the story, I want to use the story to highlight the importance of having an effective business plan, a well-detailed SWOT analysis, and also the effectiveness of brainstorming. Being able to brainstorm before you take your business idea and actually make it a full business. So what exactly is SWOT analysis? SWOT analysis stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a strategical method that businesses can use to effectively take advantage of emerging opportunities and also be able to fend off potential external threats to your business. So how do you conduct a SWOT analysis? You make a SWOT analysis by listing out your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in a graphical manner. Your strengths, those things that you are personally strong at in your business. For example, one of the strengths with being a wedding venue owner is the fact that I'm also a photographer. And one of the strengths that I have over my competition is the fact that I have readily available photos and videos that can be effectively used to market my wedding venue. One of the threats that can happen in a business are things like COVID-19, inflation, or any sort of global disaster that affects the decisions that consumers make. And there's several opportunities, and also you want to think about the personal weaknesses that you have in your business. So when you can effectively and honestly list out all the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to your business, it is important to be able to get your team members together or your manager or your business coach or mentor and have an honest brainstorming discussion session on how you can effectively use your strengths to affect any business you have or fend off any threats and weaknesses in your business. So now let's go back and talk about how I almost made 180K to a 250K investment mistake. As many of you guys know, I'm the owner of Angelo's Garden, a wedding venue in Central Arkansas. When we decided to build Angelo's Garden, there were not a whole lot of venues around. We were under the impression that we were going to be one of the newer venues for a very long time. However, within a few years of building Angelo's Garden, there have been about 15 to maybe 20 brand new wedding venues that have been built within a 50-mile radius of Angelo's Garden. So this essentially represents immediate competition. And it's important when you have competition in your business to be able to find ways to make sure you rise above the competition. So here's the story. When we built Angelo's Garden, my plan was to build a aesthetically pleasing outdoor ceremony space where brides could get married out in the open and experience the beautiful views and nature of Angelo's Garden, and of course, a beautiful ballroom to have your reception. Now, this may not be appealing to every single person out there. We were able to find clients and customers that absolutely love that idea, and it's been successful from inception. However, there started to become an emerging trend of people that were building wedding venues and also building wedding chapels with the venues. Now, what do I mean by a wedding chapel? A wedding chapel is essentially like a closed building where you can actually have a wedding ceremony, which is completely separate from a ballroom where you would have a wedding reception. So in Angelo's Garden, that was never our intention. And you might as well consider this one of our potential weaknesses, so to speak. Now, let's face it, even though not having a wedding chapel looked like a disadvantage, it really was a red herring, and I'll explain a little bit later. But regardless of the situation, I was in some sort of panic. I felt that I needed to do something that was going to also make sure that my venue didn't give an appearance of lacking something that people may start considering standard. So I sprung into action and convinced myself that I was going to keep up with the Kardashians. I was going to build a wedding chapel. I literally remember the play-by-play on how I convinced myself that this was a good idea. And then I was able to convince my wife also that it was a good idea, and I consulted with some friends and some family, and everybody generally thought it was a good idea. So I went to bed that night. I woke up the next morning, and my mind totally changed. I started to question the reasoning behind why I wanted to build a wedding chapel. And this is all brainstorming. So I started to doubt the very decision. But in my SWOT analysis, when I did my SWOT analysis, I identified that I had a potential weakness. And of course, the easiest way to fix a weakness is to completely eliminate it by building a chapel. But did it make sense? At least did it make sense for my business? So I started to write down all the things that would transpire if I went ahead and made the decision to build a wedding chapel. One of the things that would have changed would I would have to raise my selling price of my wedding venue. So imagine this. Imagine if you have a bride that absolutely falls in love with the natural beauty of Angelo's Garden. I will now have to charge her more just because I had the desire to build a wedding chapel for no reason other than the fact that everybody was doing it. I would now have to charge this bride more even though she didn't care about a wedding chapel in the first place. The second reason would have been it was going to be very expensive and require a whole lot of capital investment. And of course, the acquisition of a whole lot more debt. Now, I do have debt already for my business, and it's okay because the sort of business I'm in, when you have to acquire such a huge asset, it makes sense to get a loan and be able to you'd have some debt as a consequence, but be able to make enough money to finance that debt to where you're able to cut off your interest and own the asset. And the third reason, which was the most important reason, was building a wedding chapel was going to go against everything that was in my business plan, everything that was in my mission statement of why I initially wanted to build a wedding venue in the first place. So what was in my business plan that this was going to go against? My main goal when I decided to build Angelo's Garden was to build a naturally beautiful, aesthetically pleasing outdoor wedding venue on the hills that overlook the mountains of Petit and to the west of it, and also Pinnacle Mountain to the south of it. I wanted to create an atmosphere that made people feel like they were in a beautiful garden while they got married, and also have a ballroom, sort of create a venue that catered to the boho bride, the shabby chic bride, the rustic bride, and also the bride that was in love with a black tie feel and have a ballroom. And so far, so good. It has been a great idea and a great investment because lots of clients love it. Now, one other functional reason why a chapel would make sense would be inclement weather, where you may have rain or extreme heat. Now, I've known that on average, we have about 2, maybe 3 rained out weddings each year. But that wasn't enough for me to make such a huge investment. I would have been making an investment of almost $250,000 just for the function of being able to cater to 3 days a year where we may have a wedding that may have to be moved into the ballroom or a rained out wedding. It just was not significant enough for me to make that move. So after that assessment, I figured out that this was definitely going to be a bad idea, at least for my business. I mean, it completely makes no sense, or made no sense for me at the time, to acquire this much debt just to cover just 3 possible rained out days. It just made no sense on face value. But I still had a problem. I wanted to remain significant and relevant from an aesthetic standpoint. I wanted to make sure my business was not forgotten. I wanted to do something that was going to keep my business in the growth stage. Remember in my previous videos where I said with Smart As Biz, my goal is to take your business from growth to maturity and back to growth. It's very important to do things to keep your business in a growth stage so your business always looks fresh and nice. If you go to the grocery store and you always see a new and improved version or ingredient put into your washing detergent or some sodas or cereal, they always do things that sort of repackage and rebrand their businesses. This is what essentially puts them back in the growth stage and makes your business always look brand new. So I had to do something. And I initially came up with the idea of building a residence. What is the Angelo's Garden residence? It's a place where people could rent out, spend the night, enjoy a great home away from home, and also prep for your wedding. I like this idea because on face value, it did not inflict with the mission statement of Angelo's Garden. It actually enhanced the reason behind why we built Angelo's Garden. Not only does a bride now have just one day to have a wedding, she has the opportunity to have Angelo's Garden at the residence for an entire weekend. So it enhanced our business plan. So that's obviously was the first plus with the residents. The second thing was it was just going to make Angelo's Garden look different. So while you can put all the wedding venues that have chapels into the same box, Angelo's Garden with a residence will stand apart and stand different from the rest of the competition. Everybody will be lumped together because they all start to look the same, but Angelo's Garden will always look different with a residence as opposed to a chapel. And of course, the third factor was we were going to make it look beautiful. We were going to create a modern cabin in the woods. I actually went as far as changing the initial plans and making the pathway that leads up to the residence a super curved path to give this idea of going into a mystery place, something that people would desire and people would want. So from an aesthetic standpoint, it was great, but I had to ask further questions because just being aesthetically enough and assuming that people would just absolutely love this place was just not convincing enough for me to make that financial investment. So I did what I do best. I decided to start doing some math, and I came up with some quick math. If I was able to make the residence such a great place that I was able to convince one bride who was sort of wavering between me and any other venue, if I was able to make her or him, a groom in this situation, decide to book my package, it would essentially pay for the residence in 1 year. Well, every year. If one bride decided to book Angelo's Garden just based on her experience at the residence, essentially that fee pays for 1 year of the residence. So that was definitely the first good thing, the first good mark on this business, on this plan. So what if I was able to make it pretty enough and beautiful enough, alluring enough to make two brides make the decision? That would mean that I would start making profit off of this asset. So now, as opposed to a chapel that wouldn't necessarily make me any extra profit, this place could actually make people book. But I needed some more convincing. Now we're also going to rent out the residence. And I also did some math that if we're able to rent it out just 2 times a month, we'll make enough money to pay for it every month and also make some profit. Now, fast forward to today, the residence is booked almost 4 to 5 times each month. So it's not only paying down an asset that I am going to own someday fully without any loan or anything like that, it's also making money. It's also generating profit. So I was on the phone with my loan officer a few weeks back, and because I've been making principal payments to sort of cut down my interest payments or interest obligation. And he told me, hey man, Uche, at this rate, you are going to pay this stuff off in about 3 years. And I thought to myself, wow, I've only had this for 2 years. So what you're trying to tell me is a 20-year loan would essentially be paid off in just 5 years. So in 5 years, I would fully own this asset. This is an asset that I can hand off to my kids, and a specific asset that's not just an asset that holds its value, depreciates. It not only appreciates in value, but it's also a profit-making machine. And that's what I've been talking about with Smart As Biz that I'm trying to do with your business, is trying to harness the profit-making ability of your business and take your business to the next level. And for new businesses, it gives you the opportunity to start your business the right way and harness the profit-making abilities of your new business idea. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want you to get the wrong impression in this video. I am not saying that building a chapel is a bad thing. I'm pretty sure these businesses and these venues actually gave it a lot of thought. They were different for some of the things that work in my business. I just want to give you guys a good distinction on how making a choice between two ideas could go from you making a $180K to $250,000 investment that would have just been a sitting duck to making about $160, $180K investment that actually makes money. These are the things that I would love to teach you how to do with Smart As Biz. So thanks for watching this video. See you next time.